So, I think it's about time for an upgrade. There you go. Much better. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Stories to the Toy Shelf Unscripted. And this time, we're going to the skies with the aerial bots. So, unless you've been living under a rock, we all know that last year we got a brand new set of aerial bots to take over from our over 10-year-old Combiner Wars set. So I figured this would be a great time to go over it because the aerial bots have always been probably my favorite Combiner team of all time. I'm a big fan of Jet, and I was really happy when the aerial bots were first introduced, I think in 1985 or 86. So as an Autobot Combiner team, I was happy with Jetfire being the first air guardian of the Autobots. And to have a whole squadron of these guys, Autobot Jets, was just mind-blowing. And the fact that they could form into a Combiner, a bigger robot, was just icing on the cake. So yeah, let's get started with the aerial bots. Okay, so let's start big with the leader of the aerial bots, Silverbolt. So I don't know what your thoughts are on Silverbolt, but okay, let's do a little comparison here. So the Combiner Wars as a toy line had a lot of problems, but basically your mileage may vary with regards to how successful a Combiner was. And for me, that was mainly due to the central unit, the how, because the limbs were basically all the same, right? So it was basically how they did the central unit. So Motor Master was probably the worst, and Menasor, you can see the picture here, he was a nightmare. But Silverbolt was actually probably, I would say, the best central unit, for lack of a better word. Any subsequent retool like Scattershot and Hungar produced a pretty proportional combiner. So as far as central units go, this Silverbolt was probably the best of the Combiner Wars. As a jet, it's obviously a stylized Concorde, which looks cool. Comparing this to the new version, which is obviously meant to be a little bit more closer to the actual real-world Concorde, this looks a lot more exciting. That being said, I guess that's the whole theme of the new updates, that they're supposed to be more faithful to the original toys. It's, again, basically the robot underneath the whole jet that folds up behind its back, but what can you do? That being said, let's get Silverbolt transformed. So, as a character, let's see, I've always been rather lukewarm, I guess is the best word when it comes to Silverbolt. He wasn't none of the Combiner, none of the characters had much of personalities to go with. But okay, to be fair, so Silverbolt was probably the most well-developed character when it came to the aerial bots, because the rest didn't really have much, at least that showed up in the cartoons or whatnot. And his thing was, he was afraid of heights. Which I guess was kind of like what's the word? Supposed to be like a thing with regards to his leadership. He had his doubts with regards to being an effective leader, and I guess that was his character arc that was shown in the cartoons and I guess subsequent stuff. So he was Transformer who transformed into a jet and who was afraid of heights. Funny, I don't know if you've ever had this discussion with your friends, like if you could have a superpower, what would it be? Like for me, flight would be the least of my choices, because I'm afraid of heights too, like Silverbolt. I'm not deathly afraid of flying. I've been riding planes since I was small planes since I was like a year old, but it's just like one of those necessary evils that I need to. I never enjoy flying. So yeah, I can relate to Silverbolt, and even if I had the power of flight, I would probably not use it very often because I just hate heights. So yeah, so this Silverbolt, again, Silverbolt in general is a pretty straightforward design. You're basically unfolding the robot that is folded up underneath the jet, and then folding the jet, compacting it into the back of the robot. Yeah, Silverbolt. Will I attempt to do the Combiner Wars as well or not? Actually, this video might draw long, so let's stop there first. Okay, so here we have them in robot mode. So Combiner Wars on the left, and obviously this Silverbolt is a lot more stylized and a lot lankier, but as it is, he's a fairly decent robot. And like, again, the newer one is more G1 tune accurate, but I can go either way. Like, you could argue that the newer one is has better proportions. He's not blockier for sure, but one thing I'll give to this guy is I love the engineering of this combiner mode. So obviously the big difference between these two sets is the combiner wires is pretty much sort of all in. I mean, barring a few like the hands and the feet, but this guy forms the entire torso, right? Whereas the new Silverbolt comes with this huge chunk of plastic, which I forgot to show off earlier. But yeah, if you have him, you know, which splits up into the legs, into the torso, and to the arms. Basically a skeleton for for Superion. So again, that's a big debate whether you prefer your combiners parts forming or all in. We'll get to that later on. But point is, this guy forms the entire torso, where this guy just gets plugged into the skeleton. And that being said, I just love the way they engineered this, because again, this is traditional in the sense that this is basically you'll wrap the legs around and basically this is the torso, the head's over here, you flip it out and whatnot, right? Whereas this guy actually flips around, which I find so cool. Let's take out this one. So these are the legs, right, of Superion. And I mean, these fold up, they form the chest, right? I'm gonna do it. I won't do a full transformation, but you get the idea, right? So this forms that the head pops up and lands on the that part. And so yeah, I just find it so cool that they kind of flipped around and did some creative engineering with regards to this torso. But other than that, again, I'm a stickler for proportions, and while some people might find this guy stocky, I think he's pretty solid, right? And so there you go. Okay, so next up we have Air Raid. So I guess we'll go by these guys alphabetically or somewhat. So A for Air Raid. And he's supposed to be the F-15 Eagle, and well, at least with regards to the combiner wires, you can see they didn't even try. This is so not an F-15 Eagle, which is, I mean, it's a cool jet, and obviously it draws inspiration from. Okay, for those who don't know, I live next to an airport, so there will be jets flying over, and I figured what's more fitting than doing a video about jets with jets flying over. So I'm not even gonna bother editing that out. Anyway, so yeah, so this jet obviously draws inspiration from the F-14 Tomcat, which actually was kind of a bone for me to pick with regards to the original lineup of jets. So I'm a big fan of the F-14 Tomcat, obviously because of Top Gun and G.I. Joe, the Sky Striker. So I was kind of bummed that the Aerialbots, the original ones, didn't have one in the ranks. Although IDW added one, but that's another story for another time. And there's a reason why he's no longer there. I would have much preferred an F-14 Tomcat over a Phantom, F4 Phantom. But anyway, more on Fireflight later. So yeah, so Combiner Wars didn't even try. Age of the Primes did, and obviously it's a lot more, much more like an F-15 Eagle, but I would say of all the jets, of the new Aerialbot jets, this is the weakest. Just because, you know, I'm a stickler, and you know the back fins aren't quite accurate and whatnot. But while I would argue that this is a better looking jet, this one is the F-15 Eagle. So let's put that aside. So Air Raid. So yeah, as far as characters go, I always saw this guy. I think he was always marketed as the warrior of the group. Like, he was the most effective in battle. He was the most, I mean, obviously, because the F-15 Eagle is, you know, supposedly one of the best fighter jets ever. You can debate with me on that in the comments, but I don't know. I always envisioned the F-15 Eagle as the most effective jet of its time. So Air Raid would basically mirror that, and he's the most combat worthy. And the problem with these like on the spot videos is like I'm always at a loss of words, but you know what I mean. He was the most effective warrior of the bunch. That being said, this one is probably the weakest looking of the new crew. I mean, he's okay. Proportions are fine. They all look stocky, but yeah, let's see. So this guy is, again, straightforward. Let's see if we can. Okay, it's pretty. I haven't done these in a while, but yeah, they're pretty straightforward. I mean, again, these Aerialbots they're not heavily engineered. It's basically a robot folded up underneath a jet for all of them. But yeah, so air raid. Uh, his chest looks rather caved in. Like, ugh. Yeah, I think that's better. So yeah, Age of the Primes air raid and Combiner Wars air raid. So continuing the theme, the older ones are obviously a little bit bigger, and the newer ones are more faithful to their original toys or the cartoons. Again, mileage may vary. If you prefer stylized versus more traditional, then there you go. I guess since this is the first, I'll do general observations. The plastic here is obviously feels a little more brittle, and that's something that's across the board for all the older the combiner wars, whereas the plastic here is softer, smoother. I don't know if that makes any sense. The combiner wires were made when articulation wasn't. I mean, it's fairly articulated, but obviously it's missing a lot of the main ones. The main one being the ankle pivot, and instead they're sculpted angled so that they can have a natural looking A stand, which is fine for the time. And again, the highlight of the aerial bots or these combiner wars or these teams is the combined mode. So a decent looking individual mode, I guess, is just a bonus. But yeah, so not a big fan of the Air Raid's head sculpt. The newer ones, the proportions are a bit stocky, but this particular one, Air Raid, feels extra stocky. So yeah, Air Raid. Okay, so next up we have Fireflight, the aerial bot with the arguably coolest sounding name, Fireflight, but I would say the most boring jet and also the most boring personality. Okay. Officially, he's supposed to be like the dreamer of the group. Like he likes to daydream a lot. He gets distracted, and he ends up flying in all sorts of directions. But yeah, of all the aerial bots, and again, this is a very low bar to set. As aside from Silverbolt, and then later I'll talk about Slingshot. The rest of the aerial bots didn't really have much personality that showed forth in the cartoons. But again, in the official tech specs, he's defined as a dreamer. But for me, the biggest issue with this guy is his jet mode, which was supposed to be an F4 Phantom, which it's the least exciting jet of the crew, aside from the Concorde, of course. But I mean, Silverbolt's excusable because he's the main unit. But yeah, so Fireflight was, I believe, the first aerial bot released in Combiner Wars. And again, it's a stylized jet. Doesn't look anything like an F4 Phantom, but I guess, it works. He looks a little bit cooler than a typical F4 Phantom. And as is the case, the more traditional looking one, again, not completely accurate, but, better. So the one thing I wish this had was, like, I believe the F4 Phantom had angled wingtips that they pointed up, if I'm not mistaken. But other than that, so I was kind of worried about this guy. So there's a bit of history for those who don't know, when the Combiner Wars line was first released, obviously, and I guess in a way to save money, the original set didn't have a Slingshot. Instead, they switched out Slingshot for a new member, a helicopter called Alpha Bravo, which I'll post here. And the reason was pretty obvious. This new member thing was a thing for at least the main four. So Menasor got a new member, Wild Rider got switched up for off-road, Groove was sized down to become a chest to become the chest of Defensor, and then in his place they added a new guy. I think his name was Rook, who was an armored carrier. And then the Combaticons had who did the Combaticons have? Oh, instead of Blastoff, they recolored Fireflight. Well, actually, he was still Blastoff, if I'm not mistaken, but now he was a jet. But anyway, those things had their own stories. But with regards to the Aerobots, so they got a new guy, Alpha Bravo, who was a helicopter, who, unsurprisingly, that mold was reused for Vortex and Blades. So obviously, this was a money-making move. Takara wouldn't hear anything of it, and they were more sticklers for tradition. So when they released their version of Combiner Wars Superion as a box set, they spent the extra money to make a Slingshot. But that Slingshot was basically, they only spent money on so it was basically a repaint of Fireflight, with the only difference being the head, which we'll get to later on, was a resculpt. So they spent on a unique head, which at the time I guess was okay. So that being said, so the original Slingshot, I mean the new Age of the Prime Slingshot actually came out first, right? Was the first of the new aerial bots. I guess this is a Slingshot Fireflight thing. So I was kind of worried that given the past that Fireflight would kind of be basically a repaint of Slingshot, but thankfully he wasn't, right? I mean, they basically all, I mean, they obviously shared the same engineering in the sense, so because they're both the arms of Superion, and so they share the same engineering and a few similar shared parts, but for the most part, at least when it comes to jet, I mean, so they retooled enough. So to give him a unique looking jet, Fireflight, to give Fireflight a unique looking jet, and a unique look in the robot mode. So as you can tell, the chests are accurate to their cartoon. So let's get Fireflight. And okay, so I'm not a big fan of, so when it comes to the aerial bots, and you'll see it. So you've got the limb bot. So unlike the original Scramble City, where the aerial bots are, all these guys were interchangeable. So while traditionally Fireflight and Slingshot were the arms, and Air Raid and Skydive were the legs, you could switch them out. Here they're dedicated. Like you cannot. I mean, these are Fireflight and Slingshot are strictly the arms. So for Age of the Primes, Hasbro basically worked out two uniquely engineered molds. So you've got the arm bots, Slingshot and Fireflight, and the leg bots in Air Raid and Skydive. And while I prefer Air Raid and Skydive character-wise and jet-wise, I will concede that this mold that was used for Fireflight and Skydive is the better mold. I mean, in terms of proportion and whatnot, it's the better mold. So, you know what? No, actually, let's do this one since. So again, straightforward-ish. Oh, this one is thing with working with these old toys. I'm always worried that the plastic won't, didn't age well and it like crack. Especially this type of plastic, I would think it's more susceptible to cracking. So I'm extra worried with regards to these guys. But anyway, I did transform these guys prior to shooting the video, so they did hold out. So this isn't the first time I'm transforming them in years. So yeah, so this Fireflight, obviously different head sculpts. This is Toon, this is more toy look, and he looks a lot better. With regards to proportions, I keep saying that, but I don't know, it just matters to me, right? For me, it's all about proportions, right? And this guy is like really, really thin. You can't, I mean, I guess the sides of his torso are red, so it kind of makes him look even thinner, but he's rather thin. And I don't know, I'm just not a big fan of the waist swivel for these toys being here in the crotch area because, well, it doesn't look natural. Obviously, you don't swivel in the crotch, but yeah, that's what this guy has, and so we live with it. So yeah, Fireflight. And since we already started with this guy, Slingshot, right? It's not alphabetical anymore, but Slingshot. So again, the original Slingshot was replaced by Alpha Bravo, and it was explained in the comics that Slingshot was killed. Superion got ripped in half by Devastator, and the result of that was, for some reason, Slingshot didn't survive, and so he was replaced by Alpha Bravo. But in Japan, they said, screw Alpha Bravo, we want Slingshot. So, okay, so Slingshot, character-wise, after Silverbolt, I would argue, is the most developed in terms of character of the aerial bots, which is not always a good thing because I think he's supposed to be the youngest of the aerial bots, and so he was characterized as kind of a dick, for lack of a better word. He was an asshole. He was the guy, that episode when the aerial bots got blasted back into time to the golden age, and they they met Orion Pax and stuff. So it all started because the aerial bots, well, I mean, they were just newly created, and they were still wondering why they were Autobots and why they saved humans, and they started questioning, and they met up with the Seekers, and Starscream tricked them, and whatever. But anyway, point is, Slingshot was kind of like the leader of that. He was one who like asked the questions, and he influenced his brothers to like question their whole Autobot thing. And so yeah, I mean, okay, fine. He also became the most passionate after learning about how the Decepticons formed and how they almost killed Orion Pax and stuff like that. So he kind of learned the biggest lesson after that. Like, he became dedicated after experiencing the dawn of the Decepticons and everything. He became the most dedicated of the aerial bots, and like, we'll get you, Megatron, whatever. So yeah, you could argue that he was like the heart and soul. Like, he had the most character, I guess. But yeah, I never liked Slingshot. One, because his jet mode wasn't that interesting. Harrier jet, the VTOL Harrier jet wasn't that exciting to me, despite its like special ability of being able to land and take off vertically. Aside from that, I wasn't a fan. Let's get this right. Of his head sculpt, which I thought was really odd because he looks bald. Right? I wasn't a big fan of the big orange noggin, but that was Slingshot for you. And yeah, so Combiner Wars Slingshot is a straight up repaint of Fireflight with a new head, which is arguably better. I think this is more tune accurate, but I appreciate the fact that they gave this guy a blue visor to break up all the orange, because this guy just looks dead. Which he's always dead. So aside from the Combiner Wars comics, he was also killed. Spoiler, sorry. He was also killed in the current Skybound comics, but then a lot of them died. But yeah, so this is thankfully we got a proper, even if he is a straight up repaint. But yeah, so Slingshot. And finally, we have my favorite aerial bot, Skydive, primarily because he transformed into my favorite fighter jet, which is the F-16 Eagle. Which is the F-16 Falcon, right? For some reason, I always took a liking to the look of this jet. And aside from that, the aerial bots basically share a common color theme of whites, grays, and reds. For some reason, Skydive didn't get the memo, and he's the most different in terms of deco. Being predominantly black, with still that red to unite the whole thing, and then with the lightning bolts in the wings. I just found that really awesome. Character-wise, he's supposed to be the nerd of the group. He's the most skilled flyer, so he studied all these aerial maneuvers from ancient dogfights and stuff. World War I dogfights and onwards. So he's the most skilled. So I think that just adds more to this coolness. With regards to this jet, okay, so obviously the Combiner Wars one is fairly decent. It does look like an F-16 Eagle. Why do I keep saying Eagle? F-16 Falcon, with one big difference, which is the twin tail fins, which does not exist, I believe. The traditional F-16 Falcon just has one. So that's the only problem with this one, I would say. But other than that, it's a fairly decent jet, stylized F-16 Falcon, and I like the touch of the sculpted in like rockets. But anyway, so the Age of the Primes version also is pretty decent. Obviously, it's not as sleek. That being said, okay, so I forgot to mention this in the Air Raid review with Air Raid. I didn't realize when I first got Air Raid that the landing gear of this guy came out of the chest. So for the life of me, I couldn't find landing gear. I thought, really? This is design, and I thought it was really that. It's like, we'll just tip over like that. Little did I know that the landing gear is right here. And so it works, right? So Skydive, again, so he's my favorite of the crew, mainly because he transforms into an F-16 Falcon. But other than that, I just love the deco. Again, like I mentioned, the lightning bolts on his wings. But other than that, I know it's a weird thing, and others would argue that it's a plain design, but I like the design of his head. I mean, the toon head, because obviously the toy head looked different, but it was very striking in the sense that it was kind of angular and the face was yellow. I joke that, I can say this because I'm Filipino, I'm Asian, but like, his face was yellow, so he's like Asian like me. But I just, let's not go crazy over that statement, all right? Again, I'm Asian, I'm Filipino, so I can say it. Anyway, yeah, so he's obviously not yellow face, he's more of an orange, but it stood out, right? I found it to be an odd choice considering he's mostly black and red that he would have a yellow or an orange face, but I guess it matches with Slingshot. But yeah, this guy was my favorite. And so thankfully, the Combiner Wars version. So again, this guy was sculpted. I mean, the engineering of this guy, okay, well, it is kind of different, but it is sort of like air raid in that sense because they're both legs. Yeah, one thing that the let's just work. One thing that the Combiner Wars version has over the how does this work again? Yikes! It's been a while. It's a double swivel. No, there you go. One thing that the Combiner Wars version has over the Age of the Primes one is, aside from being pretty much all in, is um, it has that scramble city thing. So you can switch the parts around. Skydive and air raid can be arms, and slingshot and fireflight can be legs. Uh, that being said, so again, he's also got that. Well, in this case, more of a bronze face, which I can appreciate as well. Proportion wise, I think he's a little wide on the chest. His arms protrude a little further than I'd like, but other than that, yeah, I mean, you either like it or you don't, in terms of style, with the Combiner Wars being much more stylized and the Age of the Primes being a lot more traditional, and others would argue a bit too stocky. But again, I'm good with it, and I'm good with replacing my Combiner Wars with the new Age of the Prime Aerialbots. But yeah, there you go, Skydive. Okay, so sorry, before we get to the combined mode, I forgot to show this off. So, like I said, while the Combiner Wars version of Superion or the Aerialbots, or their Gestalt in general, were kind of like all in, where in the central unit formed the entire body. Age of the Primes went another route. In order to have a more solid combiner, they basically parts formed. So, this whole chunk in the back basically forms the skeleton of the combiner, where which the other parts plug into. And while there's a workaround with stuff like Motor Master from the Stunticons, where his trailer can form the skeleton, and it does. We'll get to his video another time. And the upcoming Bruticus Onslaught's trailer, I guess, forms as well the skeleton. With Silverbolt, they didn't have that, so they basically made something up, which was basically this entire back section, which can look kind of odd, but honestly, I like it. It's creative. E for effort. A for effort. Um, it, it it looks fine. I mean, some might see it as overkill, but I think it looks fine. Like it's sort of like a space mode for Silverbolt, and so yeah, that's all I have to say about this. Good job, Hasbro, and let's get to the combined mode. Okay, so I obviously did not think this one through. Obviously, this is one of the biggest things that I've ever gone through with these unscripted videos. And so these are Superion, the combined form of Superion. On the left, Combiner Wars, and on the right, Age of the Prime. So right off the bat, state the obvious. So this Combiner Wars Superion is a souped up version of Superion. I bought myself the Perfect Effect Combiner kit, the upgrade kit. So, okay, another cost cutting measure that the Combiner Wars did was they gave these guys these accessories which were supposed to be multi-purpose. So hold on. Okay, sorry. So yeah, I don't. I think the original Superion parts are in storage. So this is what I could dig up. I think this belonged to Bruticus. So yeah. So but they all basically came with these things. We were supposed to serve multi-purpose use. So they could actually they either would be their feet, and if you can tell, for feet they look pretty small, but basically they would form the feet and let's see if we can pull this one out. There. Basically, you could make them into a hand. So, left hand or right hand. So they were basically interchangeable, and every single combiner limb bot came with one of these things. And like for alt mode, they could technically pass for a weapon. So yeah, so they all basically came with that. They were supposed to be either hand. They could be either hands, which were decent enough for hands, but for feet, they sucked. No ankle articulation, and well, yeah, you can tell something this big being held up by two small things like these is a recipe for disaster. So, third-party companies like Perfect Effect and DNA saw money, and basically this is where they made a name for themselves in Combiner Wars upgrade kits. And so I got myself the one for Superion, which basically gave him big feet, more posable hands, very posable hands, a chest piece, crotch piece, and thigh thickeners, for lack of a better word, just make the thighs look a little bit more. Now I'll post a picture of what the basic bare bones Superion looks like, but he looked really spiny. So obviously this is a lot better. Not the best. I mean, it's still pretty unstable, but I mean, he looks good on the shelf. He looks a lot more bulky. But with regards to Combiner Wars, so this was the problem. So, one, as far as Combiner Wars went, Superion was one of the better proportioned ones because of the design of Silverbolt. But they were pretty flimsy, right? They're very flimsy, and they serve their purpose. They can, see, like there. The feet are connected by a 3mm port. So, yeah, that was prone to like getting detached quite easily. So even with these parts having, they're much better than the original feet. They are still prone to bad design, which is like, again, attachment via 3mm port. So these guys thankfully had ankle pivot, so you could have better poses, but still, very limited. And so yeah, you can tell he's not the most stable combiner. But he looks good. And yeah, he's fun, right? He's not a headache to form and transform. But I think when it came to, okay, this guy is like literally falling apart in front of me. So if I let go, he's going to fall. So, but you get the point, right? Pretty decent combiner mode, fun to fiddle around with and play, but will fall apart on you at any second. So that being said, with that in mind, when it came to Age of the Primes, Hasbro had one mission, and that was to make a very stable, solid combiner. Like, this thing's a brick. It's not gonna fall apart on you, and it's fairly articulated. But the way they did it, again, it's a controversial decision or a controversial move. I guess some people hate it. They think it's like blasphemy. Is using parts forming. So they basically, that whole chunk of back jet that Silverbolt had unfolds into a skeleton for the combiner, which makes it very stable. And then you just plug in everything. So the arm jets break in half, and you just plug them in. The jet. Okay, well, sorry. One more thing with the Combiner Wars. So they did the weird. Again, maybe it's another controversial decision of going against tradition and putting the jets in front. I don't know how you feel about that. I think it's pretty cool because, I mean, again, with the jets in the back where they're usually supposed to be, kind of hides them, so they're not pretty obvious, and it makes Superion not look like he's completely made out of jets. It's a bit pointy and everything, but I don't know, it fits, right? The jets are very obviously arms, but in the legs they're not. So having them in front plus pointy knee guards are pretty cool. So I don't know. I don't know where you fall on that. I thought it was pretty cool. But anyway, back to the Age of the Primes, which is very traditional. So the jets are back in the back. And fine, the incorporation could have been better. It's still kind of thick, but you know, it works, right? And the articulation is there. There's enough space for him to bend forward properly. And so yeah, he's a solid bot. Just thanks to the skeleton. And the feet are a bit wonky, but again, they work. And they've got incorporated ankle tilt, which makes things a lot, you know, easier. So yeah, Age of the Primes Superion. And so am I happy with this? Very much so. A lot better than actually. So the first one that they did was Menasor, and that's a whole thing in itself. So I've got Menasor over here, and eventually I'll do his video, but that had its own problems. But it's a huge improvement over the Combiner Wars one, which was probably the worst Combiner Wars Gestalt. But anyway, enough of Menasor. We have Superion. We have Bruticus. Devastator came out, but I haven't gotten him yet. I don't know if I have plans to, because I kind of like the Combiner Wars one. It was an anniversary gift, so there's sort of a nostalgic thing to it. So I don't know if I'm ready to let go of that one. But Bruticus is definitely on the way, and hopefully the Protectabots will be announced pretty soon. Other than that, yeah, so this is Age of the Prime Superion, and this is Combiner Wars, which will soon be going up for sale. I don't know about you. I just like having like one definitive version on the shelf, one masterpiece and one chug version. So this guy has served his purpose and will be going on eBay. That's kidding. I don't use eBay over here, but he will be going on sale. If you're in the Philippines and if you're looking for a decently taken care of, there's a little dust here and there, but you know, for the most part, very little yellowing. If you live in the Philippines and you want a Combiner War Superion for cheap with an upgrade kit, I'm not sure if I still have these things, but you know, do you really need them? Let me know in the comments below. And let me know whether you prefer the Age of Primes or Combiner Wars. And I guess that's it. Thanks for watching, and till next time, see ya.